Um, my books have sold themselves enough, so the idea here is not to sell the book. I thought I'll perhaps start with a couple of extracts from both the books to understand why Hindutva. Because I think I can assume fairly, without being presumptuous, that members of this audience must have consumed all my content and suffered it enough on YouTube, at least for the last 5 or 6 years. So what is Hindutva? I think the basics of the definitions are done. But let's come to the practice of it. Just bear with me for about 10 minutes. So that I expose two different problems, which I think equally affect us. And then I'll come back to what the Honorable Consul General was kind enough to tell us about the assimilated nature of the Hindu community here. There is something to be said on that subject. So since you have chosen to come here, I would assume that you're adult enough to take offense. So I'll use the opportunity to offend you as much as possible. So this is from page number 320 of the first book. It's a bit of a long read, but just bear with me. There's a reason I'm going to read this, and I'll connect both the dots. So this is an extract from a letter dated 17th of August 1823 from the collector of Bellary in Karnataka. And he's writing this to the president and members of the Board of Revenue of Fort St. George, which happens to be the southern establishment of the company in Madras, then Madras. And this is what he had to say about the Indian education system in 1823. English education system was introduced only in 1835. What were we being taught in our schools? So let's just try and understand this. The population of this district, and these are extracts from the letter, the population of this district is specified in the enclosed statement as 9,27,857, or a little less than 1 million souls. The number of schools is 533, containing more than 6,641 scholars, or about 12 to each school, and not 7 individuals in 1,000 of the entire population. Hindu scholars are in the number of 6,398, Muslim scholars are 213, and the whole of these are the males, with the exception of only 60 girls, all of who are Hindu. The English language is taught in one school only. Tamil in 4, Persian in 21, Maratha in 23, Telugu in 226, and they call it Kannada in 235. Besides these, there are 23 places of instruction attended by Brahmins exclusively, in which some of the Hindu sciences such as theology, astronomy, logic and law are still imperfectly taught in the Sanskrit language. In these places of Sanskrit instruction in Hindu sciences, attended by youths and often by persons far advanced in life, education is conducted on a plan entirely different from that pursued in the schools, in which children are taught reading, writing and arithmetic only in the several vernacular dialects of the country. I shall endeavour to give a brief outline of the latter, as to them the general population of the country is confined. So these were the things which are going to be taught in schools. Let me just identify what was taught. The education of the Hindu youth generally commences when they are 5 years old. On reaching this age, the master and the scholars of the school to which the boy is to be sent are invited to the house of his parents. The whole are seated in a circle around an image of Ganasi. What they're talking about is Ganeshji. And the child to be initiated is placed exactly opposite to it. The schoolmaster sitting by his side, after having burnt incense and presented offerings, causes the child to repeat a prayer to Ganeshji, entreating wisdom. He then guides the child to write with its finger in rice the mystic names of the deity and is dismissed with a present from the parents. What is this ceremony? Or we call Aksharabhyasam. The 3 books which are most common in all the schools and which are used indiscriminately by the several castes. Please underscore both these words. All schools, several castes, not limited to only what they call Brahmins, are Ramayana, Mahabharata and the Bhagavata. But the children of the manufacturing class of people have, in addition to the above, books peculiar to their own religious tenets. So if it's a Vishwakarma community, then they have their books in addition to all of this. And those who were the lingams, such as the Bhava Purana Raghava King, so the ones who are Lingayats, they have additional books. The lighter kinds of stories which are read for amusement are generally the Panchatantra. The books on the principles of the vernacular languages themselves are several dictionaries and grammars, such as Nighantu, Umara, so on and so forth. But these last and similar books, which are most essential and without which no accurate or extensive knowledge of vernacular languages can be attained, are from the high price of manuscripts. What I was trying to showcase through this extract were 3 points. Even as late as 1823, the school system taught Ramayana, Mahabharata and Bhagavata to children of all castes. All castes. In addition to that, depending on any literature that exists for specific vocations, that literature was taught as well. 2, until 1823, if this literature had survived in schools as part of our mainstream education, that means Islamic invasions had not destroyed our education system. The sword had not destroyed the Hindu education system. Notwithstanding the amount of libraries that were burnt, whole-scale destruction of Veda Patashalas and Gurukulas, even then this system had managed to survive in whatever form as of 1823. So what happened after that is the replacement of the Hindu education system with the English education system. Now, it's easy to blame the Britishman. So let's see what our so-called reformers did. At page number 322, I'm extracting a letter dated December 1823 from social reformer Raja Ram Mohan Roy to the Governor General of India at that point, William Pitt. Now here's what he writes. I would request you to bear with me when I read out this craven language and the language in which he literally begs the British man to help us, because apparently our education system was full of superstition. Here's how he writes. Sir, I beg leave to send you the accompanying address and shall feel obliged if you will have the goodness to lay it before the Right Honourable, the Governor General and Council. Standard formal language, you don't need to blame him for it. We idiots continue to write it in courts till date. Okay, so you can't blame him for doing this in 1823. It's my lords, my lords, my lords. We still go on with it. We don't have a House of Lords, but they are the lords for some reason. So here's how he writes. To His Excellency, my Lord, humbly reluctant as the natives of India are to obtrude upon the notice of the government the sentiments they entertain on any public measure. All he is trying to say is, my apologies for disturbing your concentration. That's all he is trying to say. This is almost Shashi Tharoorian language in play, going back to 1823. Or maybe he is using the language of 1823 in 2025. There are circumstances when silence would be carrying this respectful feeling to the culpable excess. Make of it what you will. The present rulers of India, coming from a distance of many thousand miles to govern a people whose language, literature, manners, customs and ideas are almost entirely new and strange to them. He himself is telling the other side, I'm sure that our manners are strange to you. Cannot easily become so intimately acquainted with their real circumstances as the natives of the country are themselves. We should therefore be guilty of gross dereliction of duty to ourselves and afford our rulers, just ground of complaint at our apathy. Did we omit an occasion of importance like the present to supply them with such accurate information? So if you fail to understand us, the mistake is ours. That's all he's trying to say. It's not your fault. Okay? Now here comes the next stinger in the letter. The establishment of a new Sanskrit school in Calcutta evinces the laudable desire of government to improve the natives of India by education, a blessing for which they must ever be grateful. And every well-wisher of the human race must be desirous that the efforts made to promote it should be guided by the most enlightened principles, so that the stream of intelligence may flow into the most useful soul channels. So here's what happened. Around 1820s, by which time the British establishment here was 1757 to 1820, almost about 70 years old. They decide to invest in the education system of India, but they realize that Muslims have their own stream of education, Hindus have their own stream of education, so they set up a seminary in Calcutta. Then they also set up the Sanskrit college in Calcutta, because they realized that let's not interfere with the religion. That's the original intention of the company, because company is basically a bunch of traders. They are not interested in your religion, they are only interested in trade. Please strike a distinction between three forces. Missionaries are different, the company is different. Company rules India until 1857. After the 1857 war, the crown takes over India from the company completely through the Act of 1858, because they realize that the company has been an utter failure in running this entire country, and they've also mismanaged the financial affairs. So 1823, when the company is still in power, they established the Sanskrit College and the mosque in Calcutta, to which he says, thank you, you have done this. And then you see, when this seminary of learning was proposed, that is the Sanskrit school in Calcutta, we understood that the government of England had ordered a considerable sum of money to be annually devoted to the instruction of its Indian subjects. We were filled with sanguine hopes that this sum would be laid out in employing European gentlemen of talents and education to instruct the natives of India in mathematics, natural philosophy, chemistry, anatomy, and other useful sciences, which the nations of Europe have carried to a degree of perfection that has raised them above the inhabitants of other parts of the world. He was saying, when you actually came out with this budgetary outlay, we thought you'd be using the money to teach us all of this. Why did you establish a Sanskrit college? Was his first grievance. While we looked forward with a pleasing hope to the dawn of knowledge, thus promised to the rising generation, our hearts were filled with mingled feelings of delight and gratitude. It could almost pass off as a love letter. We already offered up thanks to Providence for inspiring the most generous and enlightened of the nations of the West with the glorious ambitions of planting in Asia the arts and sciences of modern Europe. We now find that the government are establishing a Sanskrit school under Hindu Pandits to impart such knowledge as is already current in India. This seminary can only be expected to load the minds of youth with grammatical niceties and metaphysical distinctions of little or no practical use to the possessors or to the society. The pupils will there acquire what was known 2000 years ago, with the addition of vain and empty subtleties since produced by speculative men, such as already taught in all parts of India. Around this period, or even a century ago before this, German missionaries had already come to India. They decided to take back manuscripts back to Germany because they found immense value in this. In 1823, Raja Ram Mohan Roy is telling the British, don't teach us the useless garbage that has been prevalent here for the last 2000 years. The Sanskrit language, so difficult that almost a lifetime is necessary for its perfect acquisition, is well known to have been for ages a lamentable check on the diffusion of knowledge. Apparently, it prevented the diffusion of knowledge. And the learning concealed under this almost impervious veil is far from sufficient to reward the labor of acquiring it. But if it were thought necessary to perpetuate this language for the sake of the portion of the valuable information it contains, this might be much more easily accomplished by other means than the establishment of a new Sanskrit college. For there have always been and are now numerous professors of Sanskrit in various parts of the country. From these considerations, as the sum set apart for the instruction of the natives of India was intended by the government of England for the improvement of its Indian subjects, I beg leave to state with due deference that if the plan now adopted be followed, it will completely defeat the object proposed, since no improvement can be expected from inducing young men to consume a dozen of years of the most valuable period of their lives in acquiring the niceties of Vyakaran or Sanskrit grammar. For instance, in learning to discuss such points as the following, he then explains what are the different words for khad, that is, what is khadati, what is khaduti, so on and so forth. He says all of this is useless knowledge. And then he goes on and on and on for at least 3 pages where he says, we'd rather learn English literature than Sanskrit. I can understand if the man had made a case for science alongside Sanskrit. He specifically says, replace all of this with Francis Bacon's philosophy. And there's a case made out for this from page number 322 to 326. So this is one aspect of the problem in terms of anglicizing our minds. Now let me read something bloodier. Just so that you know what are the twin problems that we face And why is it that I say that colonization is only one part of the problem? We have two problems to deal with as far as Bharat is concerned. One is the tiger and the other is the snake. You decide who is who. I leave it to your fertile imagination. Now let's come to some portions of this. This is, This is from page number 483 of the second book. I'll connect this, just be patient. This portion of the book deals with the period after 1924 when the Khilafat movement is over. And then the movement for Pakistan is gaining steam. Let me read this. The period after December 1924, this is page 483, would witness the gradual movement of pan-Islamist Muslim readers thrown up by the Khilafat movement in three different directions. Just pay attention to this. The first group, led by Ali brothers, would continue to work with the Central Khilafat Committee for the resolution of the Middle East, as well as for the cause of Muslims in Bharat. They're openly saying we only work for Muslims and Islam. The second group would move to the League, which is Muslim League, owing to its revival under Jinnah. This group too would work for the cause of Muslims in Bharat. The second group clearly says we too work only for the Muslims of Bharat. And the third group, who called themselves nationalist Muslims as opposed to Muslim nationalists, namely so-and-so, so-and-so, one of them was Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, the ancestor of Amir Khan. I don't think people know it. Okay? Would move into or back to the Congress and claim to work for the cause of Indian nationalism, secularism, and India's composite culture. So three groups. Two groups would say, we will openly work only for Muslims. Third, come back to the Congress and say, now we'll work for Bharat and Bharat's syncretic culture, what they call, what is that fictional creature? Ganga, Jamni, Tehzeeb. Okay? Leaders like B.S. Munje, Malvi and Rai, who are Malvi, Madan Mohan Malvi, the founder of Banaras Hindu University, Rai is Lala Lajpat Rai. However, were concerned that the role of these nationalist Muslims in the Congress was to exert pressure from within the party, and that the role of the other two groups was to exert pressure from outside. Whether their concerns were validated with time or not, and whether there was any difference at all between the goal of Muslim nationalist and nationalist Muslims, we shall see in the third book, which I'll come out with. Ask yourself if someone else is making the same mistake or not, as the Congress of the 1920s. After this, I discussed four riots: Malegaon, Malabar, Gulbarga, and Kohat. Malegaon is in Maharashtra. Malabar is in Kerala. Gulbarga is in? Kohat is in? We don't know. Northwest Frontier Province, which is currently in the land of the pure, namely Pakistan. Okay? So 1920 onwards, we witness a host of riots. But I'll give you a simple figure so that you have a clear picture. In 1921, this is the composition of Muslim population in different provinces of Bharat. Madras had 6.71%, and Madras would mean not just Tamil Nadu today. You look at parts of Odisha, Andhra, all these places. 6.71%. Bombay had 19.74%. Bombay included then Gujarat as well. Bengal, 54%. 54%. United Provinces, 14.28%. Punjab, 55%. Bihar and Odisha, 10.85%. Central Provinces, 4%. Assam, 29%. Northwest Frontier Province, almost 92%, 91.62%. Which are the parts of Bharat that went on to become Pakistan? Punjab, Bengal, Northwest Frontier Province. What were the populations? 55, 55, 92. Okay? And then portions of Assam, 29%, because it became part of East Pakistan, which becomes the younger brother now called Bangladesh. Okay? The unoriginal younger brother who wants to imitate the elder brother. Let me just read out this, because I think once I read out this portion as to what happened in Kohat, you will remember what happened in 2022. Coming to the Kohat riots in NWFP, the resolutions passed on the Kohat Hindu exodus by the Congress, the League, and the Jamaat-e-Ulema-e-Hind at their respective annual sessions of 1924 were discussed. I will now draw from the proceedings of the Congress session, in particular Lala Lajpat Rai's narration of events. This is what happened. If the language shocks your conscience, please follow it. Rai's speech, which was based on the undisputed facts contained in the government report, inform us that in mid-August 1921, on the eve of Janmashtami, a publication that denigrated the Hindu faith was authored by a Muslim and circulated in Kohat, where 93% of the population was Muslim and 7% Hindu. In response to the anti-Hindu publication, Jeevan Das, the secretary of the local Sanatana Dharma Sabha, responded in kind with a poem. You said something, I responded. Expectedly, the poem offended the sentiments of the Muslims of Kohat. Given that the Hindus were vastly outnumbered, on 2nd of September 1924, the elders of the community chose to apologize on behalf of Jeevan Das and went to the extent of passing a resolution expressing their apology and sought the forgiveness of the Muslim community. However, copies of the so-called blasphemous poem were sent by the local Muslims to the local Khilafat committee, the government authorities, and to the border Muslim tribes. So the copies had been sent to everyone around. In the meantime, Jeevan Das was arrested and released on bail, which angered the Muslims. On 8th of September 1924, the Muslims of Kohat reportedly took a vow of divorce at a local mosque. What does it mean? That if their demands were not fulfilled by the authorities and Jeevan Das was not punished to their satisfaction, they would take the law in their own hands and do what was expected of them by their faith or divorce their wives. Easiest disposable commodity. It's done. And we didn't have the Supreme Court judgment then, no. Matter of seconds, it's over. As we shall see later, in the context of Mopla riots, this is a common practice among Muslims before they seek martyrdom or shahadat. Early in the morning of 9th of September 1924, the attack on the Hindus and the Sikhs of Kohat began with the looting of their shops. Reminds you of Leicester? Okay. Frantic messages were sent, and in Leicester we are what, 17%? Close to 20%? Tabhi yahi haal hai. Theek hai. Frantic messages were sent by the Hindu community to the local authorities, but to no avail. You're well entrenched, you're well assimilated, you're occupying all sorts of positions of power here. We will see what happens. The attacks continued on 10th of September, with the Hindu and Sikh houses being set on fire. Finally, apprehending mass slaughter of Hindus and Sikhs, they were evacuated to the cantonment and then to Rawalpindi. They constantly were trying, and I've not extracted this here, they were desperately calling the Rawalpindi cantonment, saying the police station has been set on fire. There is no law, there is no order here. The army has to come. From the night to the morning, nobody is taking the calls in Rawalpindi. And throughout the night, it's going on. Mass rapes, slaughter, setting shops and houses on fire. And you see what happens here. Commenting on the entire episode and the frequency of communal riots across the country, following is an extract from Ambedkar's book, Pakistan or Partition of India. Please do read it. After this happened, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, commenting in a Congress resolution on the Mopla, rather on the Kohat riot, he basically said, he is telling the people who've been pulled out of Kohat, I will not rest until every Hindu member from Kohat has gone back, and I will go and urge the members of the Muslim community to take them back. I think if my memory serves me right, those guys are still here. They have not gone back. Because once an area is de-Hinduized, it is de-Hinduized forever. Okay? Now, 1921, around this period, the Mopla riots. I think one of the best letters ever sent to shame Gandhi for his role in the Mopla riots was by two people. One is Sankaran Nair of the Congress himself, and then Annie Besant. If somebody had received a letter in the language that Annie Besant had sent to Gandhi, I would have expected that gentleman to commit suicide after that. Stinging letter. castigating, strident, pungent, if I may say so. Page number 519. This is Sankaran Nayar's letter titled, article titled Diabolical Atrocities on the Outrage in Malabar. In my first article, I dealt with the prime causes of the present outbreak, the dangerous game played by the leaders of Khilafat and the non-cooperation movements in Malabar, which set the whole of the region ablaze, and the extent of blunders, murders, and forcible conversions. The experiences I am about to relate will satisfy every Hindu endowed with common sense. He was giving Hindus too much of credit. That the Moplas resorted to the most repugnant fanaticism, which may be ascribed to nothing but selfishness, love of money, love of power, which are the prominent features of the present outbreak. Refugees narrate, and here I've italicized it for abundant measure so that Hindus don't forget reading this. Refugees narrate that after forcibly removing young and fair Nayar and other high caste girls from their parents and husbands, the Mopla rebels stripped them of their clothing and made them march in their presence, that is, in the presence of their families naked. And finally, they committed rape upon them. In certain instances, devoid of human feelings and blinded by animal passion, the Moplas are alleged to have utilized a single woman for the gratification of the carnal pleasures of a dozen or more men. The rebels also seem to have captured beautiful Hindu women, forcibly converted them, pierced their holes in their ears in the typical Mopla fashion, dressed them as Mopla women, and utilized them as temporary partners in life. Hindu women were threatened, molested, and compelled to run half naked for shelter to forests abounding in wild animals. Respectable Hindu gentlemen were forcibly converted, and the circumcision ceremony performed with the help of certain local priests of the Muslim community or the clerics. Hindu houses were looted and set fire to. Will not all these atrocities remain as a shameful image of the Hindu-Muslim unity, of which we have heard much from the non-cooperation party and the Khilafatwalas? The ghastly spectacle of a number of Hindu damsels being forced to march naked in the midst of a number of licentious Moplas cannot be forgotten by any self-respecting Hindu, nor can it be erased from their minds. On the other hand, I have never heard of the modesty of a Mopla woman being outraged by a Mopla rebel. Subsequently, this entire massacre and genocide was given the character of a peasant rebellion by the communists of India. And that is what is taught in our textbooks. Annie Besant wrote in 1921, the gist of it is, allow me to say this, Gandhi, aap mein thodi to sharam honi chahiye. This is what she basically said. Because she's basically asking him to have some sense of shame and grow a spine and a conscience. This is what she writes. Now, what I'm trying to say is how different is the modus operandi in Leicester different from the modus operandi in Kohut? If I still have to explain Hindutva, the semantics of Hindutva, the definition of Hindutva, the grammar of Hindutva, I don't know really whether I'm trying to awaken the community or has the community decided to commit suicide. Allow me to disavow you of what this is not. This is not a Katha Vachan session under any circumstances. I have better things to do in life. I'm sure you also have better things to do in life. Do not let your affluence and your material prosperity lull you into a false sense of confidence. You can't let's say, afford to go into this spectacularly Hindu trait, Kumbhakarna slumber, where the richer we get, the less Hinduer we become. And we start separating ourselves from the rest of the community. You have two problems. One is the ghost of Raja Ram Mohan Roy continuing to afflict you, wherein you look down upon your own culture and you look up to the West. I would say there are good reasons to look, let's say, to seek inspiration from the West. I'm not going to say, Mera Bharat Mahan on everything. The reality is what it is. But there is also something of value in your culture, which they too have recognized. So when Swami Vivekananda was asked, why did you set up the first mission in America? He didn't set it up in India. Right? He first set it up in America because he said, these are brown slaves, brown sahibs. If I set it up here, it will have no value. Let me set it up in America. Let some white people come and populate the space. Let them say, aha, oho, Hinduism. Then these people also say, aha, oho, Hinduism. Because until then, they will not know the value of what they have. Because Ghar ki murgi, dal bati. Right? He decided to apply that strategy. And that is one aspect of the problem in terms of very poor understanding of your own culture and almost, let's say, self-loathing to the point of running away from your identity as quickly as possible. Then comes the second aspect, which is growing a spine as well. Otherwise, this is what will happen. This is barely a century ago. If you think it hasn't happened after that, भाई कश्मीर आपके सामने है, बंगाल भी आपके सामने है, असम भी आपके सामने है, त्रिपुरा भी आपके सामने है, बांग्लादेश भी आपके सामने है. How many more examples do we finally need for us to actually wake up? Does it truly need to knock at our doors for us to wake up? So Hindutva has two components. One is to address the ghost of Raja Ram Mohan Roy within. To say, अंदर से तो अंग्रेज मत बन जाइए, please. Retain some degree of self-respect as a culture, as a community and civilization. And second, protecting yourself from the outside. And you can't hope to do one without the other. If you have no respect for what you are, you will quickly give up what you are. All it takes is a mob to stand outside. So, perhaps my exhortation here in this trip is only this. Consuming reels on YouTube is good. ठीक है, कर लो. Thug life videos, do that also. Maybe buy a couple of books, do that also. But what is the message? What is the impact? What is the takeaway? How are you applying it? Because I guarantee you this, I am not going to do this for the rest of my life. I have no interest. 2 days ago, 3 days ago, Canada Hindu Foundation is calling. Sir, वहाँ पे भी एक tour कीजिए. I said, और कोई काम नहीं है क्या मेरे पास? I don't wish to do this for two good reasons. In the day and age of internet, you do not have the excuse of ignorance anymore. It's not as if all these ideas and these aspects of history are hidden away in some, let's say, rickety corner of some library which nobody visits. It's out in the open now. You can't read, you have videos, podcasts. You can't consume a podcast, you have reels to cater to all, shades and hues of attention spans. What more is needed? If some organization wants to pull out of events such as these because it's controversial, because I'm coming, surely that organization has no sense of Shatrubodh whatsoever. And that organization cannot be relied upon when you're in trouble, because they would not want vivad. They would not want to be part of a controversy. Those who don't want to be a part of controversy and they hope that we will go in a non-confrontationist way, convert hi ho jaओ, baat khatam ho jayegi. There will be no cause for confrontation after that. That is the only thing that's actually the bone of contention, right? Other than that, what aspect of your life do people have a problem with? Are there no rich people other than us? Sure. Their problem is your identity. So if your identity is the bone of contention, and defending that identity is controversial, then don't do it. Give it up. Simple. Then I would only say, do me a favor, remove the word Hindu from the name of your organizations. At least we will know that you don't represent us. I have almost very little patience for anyone who shirks away from Hindutva. Because that means you don't recognize the existence of a threat, a real existential threat, nor do you have the guts to actually respond to that threat. In such a situation, you are worse than an ornament. At least an ornament has an ornamental value. You don't even have that. What is the purpose of your existence? So, I would urge the members of this community. Let me give you something positive to go back with so that you're able to understand both sides of the equation. Be grateful for what happened in Leicester in 2022. It woke you up at the right moment. if it can happen to a part of this country which has a significant Hindu population, it can happen in any part of the country. And my belief is Hindu Americans are perhaps sleeping on the wheel, whereas British Hindus, in my view, after having spoken to so many organizations and students and on campuses, various campuses, I can say this for a fact, I go back a happier person, because I think here the community is slightly more awake compared to the Hindus. Perhaps it's a function of scale and compactness, because you're not as widespread as America. The diaspora is older, so on and so forth. But if all these reasons exist in your favor, you certainly don't have the excuse for sleeping on the wheel anymore. Ideally, I would have expected Hindu temples here to take the lead in spreading this message. But temples too want to be non-confrontational and non-controversial. And this I say after having spoken to several members of the community here, asking them, why is the temple here not the point of convergence for Hindu issues? Because apparently discussing issues of your survival are political issues. And they are party-related issues. Allow me to say this with the liberty of the organizers being present here. Ignore political parties altogether. Focus only on your issues of concern, your issues of interest. Whoever gets the job done, go to them. But if ultimately only one person constantly does the job, or at least shows an interest in doing your job, then it's not your fault. It is no more political, it's almost as if you have run out of options. I can't think of an instance where issues of concern of other communities are seen as political issues. They are seen as issues of minorities, religious minorities. So if you're in Bharat, you're a majority, nobody gives a damn. If you're here, you're a minority and your issues become political issues, and therefore again nobody gives a damn. So what's the point? Majority में भी फंसे, minority में भी फंसे, ना घर का ना घाट का. वो क्या होता है ये आप जानते हो. To put it in Queen's English, a dog in the manger. Whatever you wish to call it in, उसका अनुवाद आप हिंदी में कर लीजिए. ठीक है? So I am not trying to be deliberately provocative or sarcastic. I am just saying that I have run out of patience in indulging in these issues. I will define colonialism for you. I will define this for you. That is being done to meet an academic audience to fight a very different battle. The battle in the so-called India chairs and Hindu chairs populating Oxford, Cambridge, so on and so forth. That's a different battle altogether. You don't need this because your families have witnessed this. I come from Bhaginagar, where I know for a fact what the Nizam did to the Hindu population there before Operation Polo in 1948. I don't need Kohat's experience. I have the so-called Hyderabadi experience served with biryani and halim. What did they do? They bunched up the men, tied them together, set them on fire for everybody else to watch. Everybody else would sit and watch, and this Mahayagni will be going on. We have lost families, we have lost friends, we have seen all of that. So it's almost as if there's not a single part of Bharat where we have not had these experiences at all. No part of Bharat has remained untouched from this. This is not a particularly North Indian experience. All of us have suffered from this. So what is left if there is a lived experience less than a generation ago telling you that the problem is still around? That means the problem has been relentless, except that we don't have the guts to look for the solution or become solutions and part of the solution. Which means the solution has to come from within. More than anything else, protection of Sanskriti, that's a secondary issue. Protecting your own families. So when people come and tell me, are you here to protect dharma? I said, I'm not here to protect dharma, karma, nothing. I'm here to make sure that there is a safe space for my family and my children. That's all I'm interested in. I'm giving you the most proximate incentive possible for you to take an interest in the topic. Don't buy my books, don't take selfies, don't take signatures, just invest in your community and your protection, and that is more than enough. That is the only bottom line here worth batting for. I will come and deliver a few lectures. Anand will come and deliver a few lectures. Our books will sell in lakhs. We'll get royalties. Then there'll be multiple YouTube videos that will go around. Everybody will share this on the greatest university of earth, which is WhatsApp University. We keep sharing from one person to another. हमने आज क्या किया? हमने एक नया ग्रुप शुरू किया. कहाँ पे? ज़मीन पे नहीं, WhatsApp पे. This can't be our approach to our problems, no? I know I almost sound like a stand-up comic, but this is the tragicomedy of Hindu existence as on date. So the joke is on us. Take it from me, you have only 5 years to prepare, and that's my reading of the situation. Because Leicester in 2022 was somebody's attempt at testing the waters in the strongest of places which has a significant Hindu presence to see, देखते हैं ये करते क्या हैं. And they were testing the response of the administration, they were testing the response of the community. I think that was merely what we call a recce. Now you should ask yourself, are we at least as prepared as Leicester? Do we have the mechanisms? Will the administration take our phone calls, or will we become another cohort? When you will need a Rawalpindi cantonment to come and pull you out of this place. Nobody thought even in 1920s, after a spate of riots across the country, that the partition of Bharat was possible. Imagine. Now when you're reading it, you're like, wasn't this fairly obvious? Wasn't the road to Pakistan obvious at least by the 1920s? Is what we are telling in retrospect, because this is called what we call in law hindsight bias. That is, you're intelligent as an afterthought. I don't want our children to say this about us. What more did these people need? इनके सामने तो ये सब हो रहा था. Because if the idea is to outsource this mammoth of a problem to a handful of individuals like me and Anand, that's not going to work out. Because if you think all of us will silently suffer the piling on, it won't happen. Because each of us will have to step in and contribute. Broaden the base of participation and stakeholdership and make it a people's movement. Do not allow political correctness and politeness to come in the way of your existence. Don't become so English that politeness matters more than life itself. So, kindly use the next 5 years to strengthen your organizations here. I will name the organizations who have taken the pains to organize this tour because they have shown the seriousness of purpose and conviction to walk the talk. Insight, a round of applause for the fantastic work that they've done. They are not full-timers, they too are working professionals with workaday lives and families to take care of, and they have still taken the initiative to put a report together to bust the lies and myths. National Hindu Students Forum, FISI, and other organizations, allied organizations, please make sure, INSA, please make sure that your youth participate in these organizations, become aware. There is no Bharat without Hindu Dharma. So if you want to replace Hindu with Bharat and play with those words and say, I'm comfortable with this, I'm not comfortable with that, makes no difference at the end of the day. That hide and seek will only last you so long. There is no Desh without Dharma, period. Wherever there is Dharma, there is Desh. So, make sure that either financially, materially, or through the use of human resources, you contribute to this. The call here is not to invite you to violate the law. No. Within the bounds of the law, you're permitted to take actions which are in self-defense, to strengthen the presence of the community, to make sure that you build allies here, those who have a common problem with everybody's problem, right? Build alliances, start taking part in the political affairs of this country. Do not be silent spectators. You can't just be people who are generating wealth, contributing to the taxes, ultimately for the taxes to be used by people who are freeloaders. Because that is a strategy of silent invasion of this country. It is surprising that the local population doesn't see the problem with it. It is truly surprising that they don't see the problem with it, that they don't see the subversive nature of this entire strategy. Whenever I get an opportunity, I'll talk to the local population and deliver the very same message. Rest assured, I'm not going to limit my audience only to you people, for sure. Because fortunately, numbers are still on your side. I am told, reliably so, that 89% of the population of this country still remains native. So all the immigrants put together, it's only 11%. So they have not lost the plot yet, but they're losing the plot council by council, county by county, and therefore they don't understand the issue. Because they think it'll happen on one day across the country. That's not how this happens. Takeover happens in parts and in silence, under the radar. So don't expect some kind of a civil war where everybody's out on the streets. They don't need to go down that path if they've taken over the administration silently. Then the job is done. Why would they come to the streets after that? Bureaucracy, police forces, administration, judges, politicians, media. What else is left in terms of institutional takeover to control you and govern you? After that, we'll be the tax-paying idiots as usual. Except that it will go to somebody else. It will become a part of a larger zakat. That's it. So, I have nothing more to say. This is the gist of it. This is the saransh of it. I can say this in 100 different ways. I can quote George Orwell to make this case and others, but it still makes no difference whatsoever because the core message remains the same. As they say, how many students of science do we have here? The first law of thermodynamics is the only law of thermodynamics. Everything else is a corollary of it. Everything else is a corollary of it. I can say this. I've been a mechanical engineer, so I know what I'm talking about. Ye internet gyan to nahi hai. So, similarly, this is the bottom line. There are only so many 108 ways in which I can restate this and tell you, please try and understand. But history has already told you what we have faced, and the cowardice that we attribute to our ancestors, I hope nobody attributes that to us. And allow me to say this, our ancestors were not cowards, because had they been cowards, you wouldn't be around, and we wouldn't be around. So, perhaps in the next 5 years, try and invest in the following sectors: law, public service, police forces, the law on both sides, the bar and the bench, both sides. And continue to have a fairly strong presence in the realms of innovation and wealth creation, because सब करने के लिए माता लक्ष्मी की कृपा जरूरी होती है. We need her. Make sure that perhaps 5 to 10% of your disposable income is earmarked for community service. If you have enough, maybe take a cut on a vacation and invest in your future by investing in the community. If you can do both, do both. But if you have to choose between the two, I hope the choice is clear, not the vacation. Okay? Kindly consider this. Don't shrink from public spaces by erasing your own existence, saying, I will avoid confrontation by removing the tika or tilak. If they have to identify you, they will anyway do it with or without the tika. So you might as well wear it and go, so that your presence is not erased from public spaces. आपको देखे बाकी लोग सीखेंगे. So please continue with it. Vande Mataram, Jai Shri Ram. Any questions?
We keep getting these knocks on our head all the time. I think after going out of this place, we might forget, but we have to keep doing this and remembering all these words. So I think Ashish ji has all the questions. So we'll have Q&A. I've got a few. Do we need a chair for you to sit here?
Maybe I'll just use the, so let's give mic to the
Yes.
People have their questions, or is ma'am asking?
She is going to ask.
Then I'll listen.
I think I do ask. Yeah. There is a mic.
So if you have them. I've got a couple of questions before we go to the audience questions. Ashish ji has shortlisted them, the interesting ones, I think. So the first question, what are the methods of working of the anti-Hindu forces? If you could help us to understand their ecosystem and methodology, and also what can we learn from them?
Do we have another mic? Or? Sure. So, in my view, what I've learned is their strategies are built on our own existence of knowledge or ignorance on our side. Where they know that there is an assertive Hindu identity, they change their strategy slightly differently. But when they know that there is a confused Hindu identity, their job has been made all the more easier. So, my wife was. Sorry, I think this works. That's okay, no problem. I think that's fine. My wife is getting ready to come to London to spend the next 5 days here with me, and she's coming from San Francisco. So the gym trainer ended up asking her about the vacation, and then she said she's going here. Then she said, I hope your husband is well built, because UK is going through troubled period. So if your husband is not at least formidable looking, then expect trouble on certain streets of London. ये बात वहां तक फैल चुकी है. I'm trying to give a parallel to say that the other side operates on its assessment of our strengths and weaknesses. The most fundamental strength that they're absolutely aware of is the absence of an institutional support mechanism. Their places of congregation and prayer are their primary places of strength, because it gives them a fantastic networking area, or let's say a point of convergence where they can actually sit and discuss their community's issues. They don't get bogged down by political issues when they have to confront the outsider. They don't let political differences, linguistic differences, regional differences come in the way. They're very clear as to who the adversary is and how they must be dealt with. Two, one of the organizers of Insight team told me this, and I don't wish to name the person out of reasons of privacy and security. Her son is a student of one of the finest grammar schools in London. School के बस में most of them are Hindus and Indians. दो ही बच्चे थे जो हमारे friendly neighbor के whatever they are, right? And two boys belonging to that country would do narebazi in favor of the community and the country, and start cracking jokes about why don't you guys eat beef? The rest of the boys would have no responses, and worse, some of them, poor people, would also join them in the narebazi. Reminds you of some of our students on campuses, right? Yeah. So they joined that, and they certainly don't have the guts to respond. Just two boys, surrounded by at least 35 to 40 boys from the Hindu community. Why? Because at that age, they're conscious of who they are, and they're conscious of who you're not. And they also know that their families will support them in this. They will not say, school किस लिए जाते हो? पढ़ो. Become, Ram is a good boy. And they also know that should they get into trouble, the community will hit the streets. At each of these levels, do you think we are prepared? Which is, do your children know? Do you know? Will you have their backs? Will your community have your back? These are the only levels left. If at each level the answer is in the negative, I surely have not told you something that you already don't know. Next.
Thank you. I have a question from Dr. Sharad Kaushik. Please comment on the immediate changes needed in education policies in Bharat to guide young minds and accurate understanding of Hindutva in Bharat.
simplify my books and Vikram's books and make it part of the public education system. Because we've done so much of painstaking research, कुछ तो इसमें से निकले भाई.
curriculum ही बना देंगे.
Please, 100%. It's become part of some universities. I'm thinking, but it's going to do it everywhere.
When you said about that.
Okay, so I'll go to the next question. In light of the devastating Pahalgam attack, which is the hot topic at the moment, when 26 civilians were killed after religious profiling, on the next day, the Indian government suspended the 1960 Indus Water Treaty. How do you interpret this pivot? How effective it will be in response to the Pakistan's cross-border terrorism?
See, remember one thing. As much as there was a homegrown movement for creation of Pakistan, Pakistan is equally the creation of Anglo-American interests. Because it had to be strategically located in that place to torment us, to prevent us from doing anything meaningful. History says as much. There's no need to actually beat around the bush on the subject. So, if you think that you're dealing with Pakistan alone when you're dealing with Pakistan, you're not. Pakistan is the Katputli, the Sutradhar is on both sides of the Atlantic. Okay? So, correct. So, remember, Pakistan is like a global concubine. जो भी पैसा देगा भारत को टॉर्मेंट करने के लिए मैं वहीं से ले लूंगा. Okay? It is the all-weather concubine of China. On-weather, off-weather concubine of America. And now this country has become what it has to Pakistan. The roles have reversed in that sense. Okay? In my view, there has not been a more pernicious Islamic state than Pakistan, because it's a bunch of new converts who want to be much more faithful than the faithful themselves. So I've said this before. Bharat suffers from multiple personality disorder. Pakistan suffers from multiple paternity disorder. Okay. Which is एक दिन तुर्की, एक दिन पर्शिया, एक दिन ये घोड़े पे आया सेंट्रल एशिया से, ये गधे पे आया अफगानिस्तान से, और ये आया सऊदी से. भाई कितने हैं भाई? As I said, ये ऐसी विकृति है जब अगर बच्चा पैदा होते दिल से 100% इसका बाप पड़ोसी होगा. Okay, this is the worst possible thing, because these guys they're so self-loathing that the Indian ancestry and therefore the Hindu ancestry is unacceptable to them. They spew venom on their ancestors because they don't come from the right stock, the right ethnic stock, and certainly not from the right religious stock. So the problem of the concept of Pakistan, wherever it exists without geographical limitations, is that it hates its ancestors and it sees its ancestors in us who have not converted. Therefore, the hatred of its ancestry is projected onto us. Because that age is associated with what they call Jahiliya, that is the age of darkness. So that Roshni of the religion has to come and shine on us, for all of us to come out of darkness. That is the basic philosophy of this mentality. Please read Venkat Dhulipala's book, Pakistan, the New Medina. Because when the idea of Pakistan was conceived of, they wanted to be the leaders of the Islamic world, and they wanted their country to be truly treated as the new Medina, saying this shall be the god of the faith. From here will be launched the attacks to cover the entire territory of Asia. So they saw themselves as the launch pad for the attacks. No wonder, if you think Kashmir is their only ask, it's not. They want the entirety of it, the entirety of the Indian subcontinent, which according to them was under the percham of the olive green at some point. So, trust me when I say this mentality believes in the concept of infinite war, which means they have no problems throwing any number of bodies into this movement because they operate like a death cult. It is much more suicidal than us, except that it is suicidal in favor of its cause for the furtherance of their interests. If you think you can hope to de-radicalize it with education, computers, prosperity, no, everything will be converted into a weapon. Whatever can be converted into a weapon will be converted into a weapon. So my humble request to those people, एक हाथ में कंप्यूटर दूसरे हाथ में ये दोनों को मिला देंगे उसके बाद आपका काम तमाम हो जाएगा ठीक है that's not how this works. Learn from history. Please learn from history. We are not talking about history of 1000 years ago or 1400 years ago. It is 1400 years old because it's still continuing. At least learn from it. There is no negotiating with this beast. There is no negotiating with this creature. The only parts of Europe which are safe today are the eastern parts of Europe, which will not negotiate and which will respond in a language worse than the language of the other side. Western Europe has now drowned in its own values because they're too busy celebrating the values as opposed to defending their civilization. I think they've learned from Hindus.
I've got so many of them. I know how interesting it is. We can go on and on. I've got two more
I will
questions.
start billing after this. मेरा मीटर चालू हो जाएगा.
Last two ones, okay. Are pseudo-Hindus or the pseudo-seculars a bigger threat to Hinduism than the Christian missionaries or pro-Islamic jihadists? I don't have the name, sorry.
My job is done.
Yes.
The audience has given the answer.
So the next one, Manisha Kumar. How do we inspire our kids in primary and secondary schools to be more open about being a practicing Hindu?
By showing them through example.
Living the
Please
yeah.
become role models worthy of emulation. Let them see that you are perfectly comfortable speaking the Queen's English or the Queen's English, depending on who's kicked the bucket, and equally comfortable with the tika, with the practice of it at home.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work? Why doesn't it work? Please explain. I'd like to understand.
I have grandchildren,
Right.
and it's the more the girls
Right.
says, I'm going to school to study,
Right.
and I want to get that knowledge first. She's only 8 years.
Right. So let's go to the next level of the solution then. How long has the Hindu community survived here? What is the age of the diaspora here? One generation at the very least?
4 generations are here.
Okay. And how many Hindu schools do you have here?
No Hindu schools.
There are 12.
Not in Wales, I'm talking about Wales.
UK.
Yeah.
So in America what happens is, and this was the laughable aspect of it, their temples are huge, their temples have enough resources. When they hit trouble in the local schools, they send them to schools run by the Chinese. Not even to our own schools, क्योंकि है ही नहीं. Because I spoke with one of these Hindu American professors who's a teacher of teacher education. And I asked her, okay, do you get support from this community? She said, nothing. I don't even know why I did my PhD for. Because the only test for the worth of my qualification is, इससे पैसा कितना मिलता है. So I said, even after all these instances of campus hatred, is this the approach of the community still? He said, yes. Those in your community who are interested in pursuing humanities, please support them. Because humanities is being weaponized against us. So as much as pursuit of STEM is important to create money, you also need somebody to explain to the rest of the world who you are. Finally, after all these decades, they've managed to distinguish between Indians and our friendly neighbors. It took them so many generations to identify कि हम Indians हैं, हम वो नहीं. Right? Now we have to take them to the next level. हम हिंदू हैं, हम वो नहीं हैं. At some stage, I think, we have to ask ourselves this question: what are they doing right which we are not doing? the same set of children are being exposed to the same set of education system. If there is a problem with the education system which is skewed against you, then it's time that you took up the issue. But if they're exposed to the same system which is equally bad or good to them, and only our children suffer from loss of identity or diffidence, then there is a problem within. It can't be a situation where I see, let's say, a Muslim child or a Hindu child going to the same school, and the education system perhaps being equidistant to both. And yet we are the ones who have a problem protecting the identity of the child. If that is the case, at least have the originality of thought and the courage of conviction to set up your own institutions to protect your culture. Assimilation and integration is not meant to protect your culture. It is meant to dilute it. And it's not wrong, because ultimately they'll say, you've come here, you've settled for generations, become part of us. That's their expectation. But to be fair, they do not interfere from whatever I've understood so far. It's easier to convince the locals of my faith than Indians or Hindus.
Yeah.
I have not found stairs in Oxford when I went with the Tika and Vibhuti prominently on my forehead. Nobody had a problem with it. I know who are the usual suspects who will have a problem with it. They'll be the Gopals and Subramaniams. And my community has set a record for producing woke anti-Hindus, the Tambram community. I can say this for a fact. As much as I am proud of my heritage, I am loath to admit that we have produced rank anti-Hindus of superlative caliber. Because that's what happens when the brain that you have inherited after generations of tapas loses samskar. Then it goes in the Vampanthi direction after that. Because removal of sanskar pushes you in that direction. So from Dakshinachara it becomes Vamachara. Why? Why not I will do this as well?
Yeah.
Because from logic it then moves down the path of what we call Vidandavad. That is why samskars are important, to ensure that intelligence and Vivek go hand in hand. Intelligence without Vivek produces our communist brethren. Thank you.